Fire engine to the rescue! Blazy was a brand new fire engine. He could hardly wait until his last coat of paint was dry. Then he'd be shipped off to a busy fire station in a great big city. He imagined how he'd race through the streets carrying brave firefighters. He would save people from tall buildings and put out giant flames. The crowds would cheer, "Hooray for the fire engine!" But Blazy wasn't bought by a busy fire station in a big city. Instead, he was delivered to Spring Gardens, a small town where there were no tall buildings and no crowds. The town's only two firefighters, Gus and Melissa, did not look very brave either. Worst of all, Blazy was the only fire engine they had. Every morning, Gus and Melissa brought Blazy out into the sunshine. Then they'd wait and they'd wait all day long. "This is not what I imagined," muttered Blazy. But one day, suddenly, the fire alarm went off. Gus and Melissa jumped into Blazy's cab. "At last!" cried Blazy. "A fire!" Blazy raced through the streets. He turned corners with speed and grace. His red light flashed and his siren blared. Then they saw Mrs. Miller jumping up and down, pointing. "Thank goodness you're here!" she exclaimed. "Look, there's smoke coming out of Mr. Stone's backyard." Melissa drove Blazy around the corner and screeched to a halt. "Oh no!" moaned Blazy. The smoke was pouring from Mr. Stone's barbecue grill. "Where's the fire?" asked Mr. Stone. Blazy was very disappointed. But the next day, the fire alarm rang again. "This one is going to be a real fire," said Blazy. "I can feel it in my hoses." But there was no fire. Billy's cat had climbed up a tree, and Billy had climbed up to get her. Now Billy and his cat were both too scared to come down. "I can't believe it," groaned Blazy. Of course, it was good to stretch his ladder, and Blazy liked it when Billy said, "Wow, what a neat fire engine! Thanks for saving us!" But this was not the exciting life of firefighting that Blazy had dreamed of. Still, Gus and Melissa were very good to him. They polished his chrome so it was always shiny. And each day they checked his ladder and siren and hoses to make sure they were in good working order. Best of all were the stories. Gus had been a firefighter for a long time and had worked in many big cities. Blazy loved to hear about all the exciting fires he'd helped to put out. Sometimes Blazy would dream of those stories, only then he was the brave fire engine who drove Gus to all the fires. One day, Gus stayed home with a bad cold. "It's just you and me today," said Melissa as she gave Blazy his weekly wash. "I sure miss Gus when he's not around." "Me too," thought Blazy. "I hope he gets better soon." Late that night, the fire alarm sounded. "Another cat, I bet," thought Blazy. But there was something different about the way Melissa jumped into the cab and started the motor. "It's a real fire," she said. "It's at the apartment building where Gus lives." A real fire! Blazy felt his heart pound as they raced through the dark night. "Come on, Blazy," Melissa urged. "To the rescue!" Blazy was glad he had practiced racing through Spring Garden streets. He was glad he had practiced sounding his siren and flashing his emergency light. The apartment building was on fire. It lit up the night sky. The street was filled with frightened people. A real fire was not at all like the ones in Blazy's dreams. Suddenly, Blazy saw someone trapped on the top floor. "Oh no," he cried. "It's Gus." Blazy was scared. The fire was hot and the thick smoke burned his eyes. "Don't worry, Gus, we'll save you," shouted Melissa. That made Blazy feel strong and brave. He stretched his ladder up to the sky. Melissa scrambled up the rungs toward Gus. Gus coughed from the smoke as Melissa helped him down the ladder. "You're going to be all right," Melissa told him. Back on the ground, Gus helped Melissa put out the fire with Blazy's water hoses. It was not easy. The people cheered for Blazy and Gus and Melissa when it was all over. It was not the big city crowd of his dreams, but Blazy didn't care. All he cared about was that he was there to help when they needed him. Now Blazy knows what it really means to be a brave fire engine. He knows what a real fire is like. So, when the fire alarm rings, Blazy mostly hopes it's a cat stuck in a tree or a smoky barbecue grill. But if Spring Gardens ever has another fire, Blazy will be ready to come to the rescue.